So, yesterday's lecture and yesterday's workshop were very easy, okay? There wasn't that much thinking involved. It was more like all about indentation and counting parentheses and knowing what code blocks are, which would have been new for some people, but for some people might have been tedious and boring, okay? Today is not going to be that easy. Today is going to be hard, okay? So, because we're going to be talking about one concept of coding and computer science in general that is extremely powerful and can be used to solve very complex problems. And that concept is looping, okay? So, there's two kinds of loops that we will be talking about today. One kind will be a while loop, and the other kind will be a for loop. Let's start with while loops. This is how you write the initial code block of a while loop. Is this big enough for you guys in the back? Good? Okay. This is how you write a while loop. The while keyword followed by an open-close parentheses, followed by an open-close curly brace. You can do it like that, but this is not neat code, right? Since it's a block, since curly braces are code blocks, you want to open it up so we can clearly see what we put inside will be part of the while loop, okay? So, when I say while loop, what does that even mean, right? That means that, and this is the most important part, inside the parentheses, whatever we put in there has to be a statement that evaluates to true or false, okay? And while whatever is in here evaluates to true, the code inside the while loop will run. It will go down to the bottom of the while loop, down to line 8, and it will check again to see if that thing is still true. If it is, it will run again, and again, and again, until the conditional statement inside the parentheses is false. Let me show you what I mean, okay? So, let's say I have out here, I have let's num equal 5, okay? I hope everyone is okay with this. The let keyword I'm using it to declare a variable called num, and I'm assigning it a value of 5, okay? So, I can say while num is greater than 0. Is 5 greater than 0? Very clearly it is, right? I can say console.log the number is 5. Oh, whoops, nope, num. Then at the bottom, I will say num is now going to be equal to num minus 1. Instead of doing that, I can say num minus equals 1. This is shorthand, okay? Num minus equals 1 is the same thing as saying num is now going to be equal to num minus 1. The same thing can be used for plus, for times, or divided, okay? But we are doing minus. And when you're decrementing or incrementing by 1, you can do num minus minus, like that. So now, if I run this, I get the number is 5, the number is 4, the number is 3, the number is 2, the number is 1. So, what is happening inside of this while loop right now? The first time, when I say the JavaScript runs this whole entire page, right? It sees we declare num variable that is going to be set equal to 5, and then we say while num is greater than 0. 5 is greater than 0. So we go into the loop. The loop starts. Console.log, the number is 5. We get it, right? Then we say num is now going to be equal to 4. Because num is equal to num minus 1, right? So num is 4. So then it checks what is inside of here again. Is that still true? Yes. 4 is greater than 0. And that's why you see the number is 4 over here in the console. And this repeats itself and repeats itself and repeats itself until this is no longer true. What if I said while num is greater than 6? Oh, I think I have a setting on. So, oh wait, no, this just never runs. So what if I did what if I didn't decrement it, right? This runs forever. This is what we call an infinite loop, okay? Infinite loops are bad. Infinite loops are wrong. Infinite loops break everything, okay? And it will run forever or until your computer runs out of memory, okay? So as you can see, it just keeps saying the number is 5. The reason for this is because we're not doing it, we're saying while num is greater than 0. The number 5 will always be greater than 0, right? Like, how I'm saying this makes it sound like, yeah, duh, right? That's logical, right? But because we don't reduce the number, because we don't reduce 5, num, the while loop, this condition, will never be false. It's always going to be true. So everything inside of it is always going to run. This is the same thing as saying while true. Like, it's always going to run, okay? Yeah. How do you break the loop? So, there is one keyword that you can use in a loop to break it prematurely, okay? So, if I go back here, and go back to what I had over here, let's say I had in here, if num is equal to 3, break. The break keyword, once it is hit, breaks out of the loop. So you can see that since num was 5, this if statement was not fulfilled, right? So we don't go into the if statement. If statements, the conditional that goes inside of the parentheses, is very similar to the one that goes inside the while loop, right? It's the same kind of logic. If this is true. While this is true, okay? And then we decrement it, and then finally num is 3, so we console it out, because that's on the line above the if statement. And then this if condition is finally met, and it's JavaScript sees the break keyword, and it breaks out of the loop. There is also another keyword that does not break out of the loop, but I'll comment this out for now. If I wrote continue, oh, jeez. Yeah, oh, whoops, that's my bad. Whoops. Stop. No, stop. Okay. So I can say if num is equal, then I have to do num minus minus. And you can see oh wait, I'm doing this like kind of backwards. Continue basically if I console log down here, made it, you can see that we're actually skipping one, right? When num was 5, we made it down here. Num was 4, we made it down here. But when num was 3, we went into this if statement, and it hit the continue keyword. When JavaScript sees the continue keyword, it skips the rest of the code inside of the loop and just goes on to the next part, okay? For while loops, you have to make sure that wherever you're continuing, you also have to increment or decrement in our case. Does that make sense? Does anyone have any questions on the continue keyword? It's very, like, makes sense in English, right? Like, if we hit this line, we continue. If we hit this line, we break out of the loop, right? And while this is true, we loop and loop and loop until that is false, and then we stop. Are there any questions? Yeah. Yeah. That's it. Here? Well, here. you need this, right? Because what happened before, you guys saw that before, right? If I just comment this out and ran this, when the number is 3, it is never being decremented. So the loop just continues, and the number is still 3, and it just continues and continues and continues, and it's always consoling up to the top. So that's why, if we ever continue in a while loop, we have to decrement. Or change the number, change the value of whatever variable it is we're comparing against inside while. Okay? You have a question? Why? You could find your own use for it. You know, it just pretty much skips an entire iteration. If this usually you would put continue inside of some conditional statement, like an if statement, and you could say if we have this kind of data, don't do the rest of the code, just continue because we don't want that. You know, it's very selective. I think continue is more useful in for loops, which I will show you this. Yeah. Then it would be another infinite loop. Because JavaScript will read continue, and then it won't run anything else. Whereas, if I put the break word here, then we would just break out. JavaScript runs line by line by line by line. Okay? It's very literal. Does that make sense? Who's confused? What are you confused about? Are you confused about the concept of looping?
No, I get the concept, but continue.
Basically, if I were to, how about this? The whole continue break thing, I will also show you an example of that with for loops. For loops, I think, are easier to understand when using certain keywords like that, okay? So let's move on to for loops. For loops, I like, personally, more than while loops. I think they're easier to reason about because for loops are cool because they go, you have to define before the loop starts where to go, where to start from and where to go until, okay? And what to do at the end of every time. And you do that all in the beginning, okay? The base looks exactly like the base of the while loop, right? Base of an if statement. The base of a code block. Keyword, open, close parentheses, open, close curly brace, right? Except now we use the for keyword. By the way, when I say keyword, I mean words that have predefined definitions inside the language of JavaScript. Meaning, if you try to make a variable the name of a keyword, JavaScript will throw you an error, okay? You cannot say let while equals 0, you know? That word while has a predefined definition, okay? Just so everybody's on the same page with what keyword means, okay? If you guys get confused about any jargon I use, just let me know. Just yell it out, and I'll give you an explanation. So, now, in the while loop, we just put if this is greater than this, you know, is this true, is it not? The for loop is not like this, okay? The for loop is a little different. For loops have 3 parts. You have to define 3 parts. The first thing you have to define is an iterator, a counter, something to make bigger over time, okay? So you can find that similarly to what we did up here with num, right? Num was the thing that we were basing up against, right? So usually we think of this as an iterator. So usually people just say, let's I equal, and I will say 0. Okay? That is the first step. The second step, by the way, the steps are separated by semicolons. If you don't put in the semicolons, it is a syntactical error, and JavaScript will flip out, okay? So, that's the first step. Then I put the semicolon. Now, I have to say what I did in the while loop. Run this loop until this condition is met. So I will say I is less than 10. As long as I is less than 10, the for loop will run, okay? Then I put another semicolon, and I put my third statement, which is what to do at the end of the for loop. What do we do at the end? Like I did I minus minus before, now I am doing I plus plus. We will make I greater by 1 every single iteration. So if I just say console.log in the for loop, you will get this 10 times. Are there any questions on the for loop? It is, I think, a little bit more complicated to set up at first than a while loop, just because you have to put all 3 things at first. But the reason why I like this more is that the risk of by accidentally having an infinite loop is reduced by a very great amount. Because since you are putting the for keyword, and let's say you forgot the I++, JavaScript will throw errors if you don't have these semicolons, So you won't have an infinite loop, we'll just have a syntax error. Yeah. I think it depends on the problem you're solving. Sometimes while loops make more sense to use, mentally, Ultimately, they are the same thing. They do the same thing, right? Except the while loop, this let I equals 0 will be up here, and this I++ will be down here. It's the same, pretty much. It's just looping. This is just more structure. Does that make sense? You can name that whatever you want. Whenever you have a let keyword over here, this is just what you want to use, right? I could say let num, let hobbit, I could say let hello in all caps. Oh, maybe I can't. That was green. I could say let this, it's still going to be 0. But if I wanted to reference this in here, I would have to actually put that in there, right? Oh. Oh. So you have to reference it everywhere. And it's a whole mess. But it does the same thing. What you're doing is just declaring a variable name to hold usually a number. I think always a number that you will want to increment or decrement whatever you want. Like I showed you in while loops, you could go down, right? You could say do this until this is less than this. And you could go minus minus. You could go down by 1. The same thing holds true with for loops, okay? Let me get this mess off the screen though. Okay. You can start I at 1,000. You could say while I is greater than 50. And you could say I minus equals 37, And then in here we could say, what is I? Oh, whoops. And you will see what happens. Start at 1,000, and we decrement by 37 every single time. And then 75 minus 37 would be less than 50. So the for loop stops. You have as much freedom here as you do with while loops, okay? They are interchangeable. Just sometimes while loops are easier to use than for loops, and vice versa, okay? So now back to the break and continue keyword. These keywords can be used in for loops as well, okay? So I can say, let me do something not as ridiculous, and I'll just go to 0. I'll do less than 10. I'll do a little plus plus, So, is everyone familiar with modulo? Modulo. Oh. This is the modulo operator, okay? The modulo operator is the same thing as divides, but it's not at all, It returns the remainder if you were to divide the two numbers. So let's say if I will say console.log the current number is I, right? I keep doing this, I don't know why. The current number is I. But if I modulo 2 is equal to 0, continue. So now we only have the odd numbers. Why is that? Yes?
Because anything even would have the remainder of 0 divided by 2.
Yes. This is a very, very quick way to figure out if anything is even or odd. Okay? If something divided by 2 is even, the remainder would be nothing, because 2 goes into any number evenly, right? So I say if I mod 2 is triple equals to 0, if this operation triple equals 0, then we continue. We stop the code and just iterate I. We go on to the next loop. And this is why I think continue is more commonly in a better way used in for loops than while loops. Because before, in a while loop, I had to increment I when I said continue. I had to account for that. If any point in time you want to have conditional statements where you skip lines of code, you have to be sure not to skip the part where you're actually changing the value that you're checking against at the end of each loop. But for loops, just do it. They just do it for you. If this is correct, this will run every time. Okay? This will stop every time. This will happen every time. You can leave your code. You can separate that. You can put your code here and not even worry about it. Okay? But that is what the continue keyword is for. Okay? Continue, skip the rest of the code, and iterate. Now, if I say whoops. Now, you can see how the break keyword can be used in for loops as well. I am only going to break out of this thing if I find the number 7. If I is at the 7th point, if this is the 7th iteration in this loop, okay, then we console log found it and we break. If this is not true, every single time in the loop we're just going to console log nope. And you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then boom, I is 7, we found it. Because we started 0. Okay? Any questions? Yeah.
So, how do you do that thing where you make all the code turn into not real code?
This?
How do you do that?
You just highlight it all, and then you press Command. On a Mac, it's Command backslash.
Just command.
Yeah, you hold Command and press backslash. If
Backspace.
backslash.
Backslash. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Also, if you highlight the whole thing and hold Option, you can move everything up and down. Cool, huh? Yeah, right? Alright, anyways. So this is like the basics of looping, okay? However, you might think, why does this help us solve so many problems? Well, the thing about JavaScript is there's certain data types that you can, what we say, traverse through, that you can loop through, that you can iterate through, because they hold other values at indexes. What you guys might already be familiar with would be the data type of a string, okay? you can loop through strings, like so. You don't actually loop through them. However, you can use a loop to access every single point of the string, every single character in the string, because strings are iterable, okay? Let's say I wanted to write a function. I wanted to write a function that takes in a string, whatever it is, makes the first letter capitalize, and then returns that string with the capitalized thing, okay? Let's say I want to do that. So I would say function capitalize equals, this. This is how you write functions, okay? Function, capitalize, this, whatever, okay? You can also write functions like this. Const capitalize equals function, like that. Or you can do it like this. This is also a function. This is ES6, okay? ES6 allows you to write functions with a fat arrow. Just open close parentheses, fat arrow, which is just an equal sign and a greater than sign, and then the open code block curly braces, okay? I will probably only write functions like this because that is a habit of mine. That's just how I do, okay? For now, though, throw you all a bone, and I'll write it using the function keyword, okay? You also might be asking, what is const? Const is another way to declare variables. However, it can never be reassigned to another value. Like up here, let I, right? At the end, we are incrementing I every time. But what we're actually doing is we're saying I is now going to be equal to whatever I was plus 1. We are reassigning I. If I said const I equals 0 in the for loop declaration, huge error would happen, okay? Because anything defined with const cannot be reassigned, okay? Yeah.
What's the advantage of defining with const instead of let?
Well, if you define functions that way, or you define large pieces of data or something that you don't want overwritten, you would use const because it would just prevent other things from happening, right? Like it would prevent you from losing what it was originally. My rule of thumb is that I define everything with const, unless it is something I'm incrementing. You know, anything that you plus equals, you can't use const. You got to use let. Okay. So back to the function, right? So this function is going to take in a string. Let me speak some jargon to you real quick. When you're defining functions, and I said string here, this could be anything. I can say this is a word, right? It doesn't matter, because this is actually declaring a variable. But what we call that thing when you're writing the function definition, we call that a parameter, okay? And then when you call the function and you pass something into it, the thing you pass into is not a parameter, it is an argument, okay? That's just some jargon, okay? So, we're going to take a word. Let's say that word, let example word, is going to be equal to Frodo, okay? So, we will say let's results equal an empty string. Now, we will write a for loop. Let I equals 0. I is less than word.length I plus plus. How did I just do that so quickly? Because there's a bunch of things that are going into my head when I already told you what the problem is going to be, right? So I know that we want to capitalize just the first letter of any word that comes in here. And I know that every other letter has to say the same. So I know that we have to go through, okay, actually, you know what? I'm going to make this a little complicated. I'm going to say I want to capitalize every even character, okay, at the index. I'm going to do that. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to have to loop through this word. I'm going to have to visit every single character, and if it is an even number in line, we're going to make it capitalized. Otherwise, we will leave it what it was, okay? So strings, all their characters are held at indexes. If I, down here, were to say console.log example word at 0, we would get F, okay? If I was to console log example word at 3, we would get D. At 30, we would get undefined, okay? Indexes start at 0 and go on until the string is done. If you try to access things when there is nothing there, this is 5 letters long, right? There is no index 30, so you will always get undefined. Okay? Okay? Does everyone understand that? All right. So, forget this. So now, I will say, if, so back to the function definition. So that means that since this index starts at 0, I know I can start my loop at 0. I know I can start I at 0. Sometimes you don't want to start at 0, and a lot of people get into bad habits of just saying, okay, let I equal 0, go until I is less than word.length, whatever. No. Sometimes starting I at 0 is not the right way to go. However, in this case it is. So I say let I is equal to 0. And how on earth am I going to know when to stop? Because you guys just saw that if I go over the length of the word, I will get undefined. Wait a second, I just said it. I can just stop when we know the length is over, right? Every string has a dot length property. So, while I is less than word.length, why isn't it less than or equal to? Because it starts at 0. The first index is index 0. That means the length of the word will not be the last index. The last index will be the length of the word minus 1. There's 5 characters, the last index will be index 4, okay? So, while I is less than word.length, we know that while I is 4, the last thing in here, we know the function will still run. The for loop will still run, not the function. The for loop will still run. But once it hits 5, the length, 5 is not less than 5, 5 is 5. So that statement is not true anymore. 5 is less than 5 is false, okay? 5 is equal to 5, okay? And then we just go every time because we want to hit every character. So now, we can write a little if statement. So if I mod 2 is equal to 0, we will say results plus equals word at I dot to uppercase. To uppercase is a method of strings. It takes whatever string that is and changes the entire thing to uppercase. Vice versa, there's also a to lowercase thing. But I said we're just going to do all of the things at the even indexes, all the letters at the even index, we'll just make capitalized, okay? So, we are saying results, this result variable that I declared at the beginning to an empty string is now going to be equal to itself plus word at I dot uppercase. Now, you will see, now you understand why loops are special. Because I will be a different number every single iteration of the loop, so we can go through everything in the string, right? Else, we can just say results plus equals word of I, as it is. And then down here, we can return result. So if we say, let what is this, what's it nope, what is this, equal to capitalize, invoked, and I pass in as an argument, example word, and then down here, I'll console.log, what is this? What do you think I will get? Frodo, right? You can use loops to do a lot of wacky things, okay? So, any questions? Any questions? Oh yeah, what's up?
Yeah. If you didn't put in the else statement.
If I didn't do it.
Yeah, to the other letters, not affecting it.
What do you think would happen?
I don't know.
No, so what would happen is it would be like, all right, if this is an even, if this index is even, everyone agrees that I mod 2 would return true if that index was an even number. Right? Okay, we're all on the same page with that, right? So this line of code will run if I is an even number. So that means when I is an even number, it will be turned to uppercase. But then, right after that, it's just going to add the same letter again. So, we get Frodo, right? Because we turn F into an uppercase letter here and put it into result. Then right after that, we just put lowercase f into the result. If else's, that's how an if else statement works. If this is true, you will run the if, and the else will not run. However, if the if statement is not true, then the if block is skipped, and then the else statement runs every single time. You technically do not need an else because of what keyword? What would I put right here to help everything? I said 2 keywords before. 50-50 guess? That's it. Oh wait, I didn't put it. Right? Because we get the same thing. Because we say, okay, if this is true, if this is even, we put it to uppercase, and then we just continue the loop. It's not like continue the loop, go down to the end. It's continue as in stop the rest of the code in the loop, so we forget this, and we just increment I. And since the continue is inside of the if, we know that continue will never be hit if I is odd. Okay?
Do you mind doing a refresher on what the plus equals means?
Plus equals means results equals results plus word of I. Plus equals is shorthand. And a lot faster to write. Right? I don't have to write results again. I can just say plus equals. Get used to that shorthand because it is honestly faster. Sometimes your variables will be longer than the word results, and you will hate yourself while you're writing it over and over again. Yeah. Yes. It is a number. I is nothing but a number. Okay? Every time. I am using I though to. What else is a number is indexes in a string. So we know that if we start at 0 and we just increment it by 1, all I'm doing is changing the value of a number. That number means nothing until I do bracket I on the string. Then you can access the list.
In the first example, though, how does we're not referencing back to anything? How does it know to
Which example? Here? This? This is the while loop. Did I do so? Wait. What happened here?
Just like a 4 let I equals 0, and I is less than 10,
doesn't stand for anything. I stands for whatever I make it, right? I'm saying here is equal to 0. It's just, I is just going to be the number 0. That's what I said. That's what it is. Then in the middle part of the for loop, we say, we will loop until I is less than 10 is not true. Until that statement is false. And at the end, I will be incremented by 1 of every loop. You can think of I as just like the thing that is keeping track of how many times you're looping. Okay? That is all I is for. That is all, and you don't have to say I, you can say Y, you can say any word, honestly, in whatever language. But we say I because I stands for iterate. Or we can say I stands for index, because usually we'll be using I to access letters of a string, and later, elements of an array, okay? Don't worry about arrays. Yeah. Yeah. I can just console log. I don't need this at all, and I could just consoleize, capitalize of example we're here. Not particularly, just to show you that I can do that. Because of this return keyword. So do you agree that result will be this at the end of the loop? Does everyone agree that result will be Frodo at the end of the loop? Return means that, okay, we threw this word in here, this random ass word, we threw it in here, did some stuff to it, and then the function itself, JavaScript sees the return keyword and will spit it back up at you. You now have that value, and I set it to a variable before. I set it to here. Okay? So now I can just take that result, and I'm going to console log it. Obviously, when you're doing real things, you wouldn't just console log variables, because console logging does nothing. All console logging does is it prints something in the terminal. It is only for human people to read. You cannot do anything with this data. If instead of return result, I did console.log result, what do you think what is this will be? I will take random guesses. Who said that? Undefined? Yes. Maybe not so random of a guess, but yes. Because, oh wait a second, but we still see Frodo over here. That's because the function runs, oh shit. The function runs, and at the very end, we console log result. So that's why we see Frodo. Result. So you know that your function is still working. Result was Frodo at the end, capitalized how we wanted it to be. However, JavaScript says if a function lacks a return keyword, it will implicitly return undefined. Okay? So that means now this thing, like capitalize of example word, is always going to spit something back. Okay? But if I don't tell it to return something, what is this is going to be undefined. So when I console log it on line 45, I get undefined. Okay? That is important. Usually, if you guys are working through your CodePen stuff, and you're seeing errors like, oh, I can't read this if undefined. It's probably because you forgot to return something in your function, which is a very common mistake for beginners, and is okay. But you might find yourself trying to debug your code for like an hour, and then you realize you just forgot a return keyword. So maybe look for that first. My honest advice for all of you. Okay. Oh shit. Okay. Any other questions on loops before I go into the slides and we talk more about loops? And I basically repeat myself for the past 30 minutes. Any other questions? Yeah.
So going back to the previous example, so if let's say you didn't write I equals to 0.
Wait, not here? Here?
The previous example.
Okay.
So let's say we didn't write I equals to 0 and I is less than 10.
If I said I equals 0,
Like if we didn't write that, so would it go all the way to negative?
if I didn't declare I,
Yeah, I equals to 0.
if I didn't say I equals 0. Well, I'm not declaring I anywhere, so that means we will get a reference error. Because I is not defined. You can only access things that aren't data types or keywords in JavaScript if you declare them. You can only access variables if you say let this equals this first. Okay? So I don't say let I equal anything over here. So that when JavaScript says I is less than 10, it's like, what the hell are you saying? What is I? It has no knowledge of what I is, okay? But here, we say let I equal 0. If I did this, this is an infinite loop. Instead of incrementing every time, we do minus minus. But the condition in the middle says I is less than 10. So that means I is always going to be less than 10. So that means we will get a lot of nopes, okay? Just like while loops. But I feel like this is harder to mess up than a while loop. Because a while loop, your condition is up here, and then you want to get into writing all your code, all of your problem solving stuff. And then at the end you have to remember, okay, now I have to decrement, now I have to increment. And that's easy to forget, okay? Trust me, it is. I'm going to go to the slides. You guys can continue to ask me questions throughout the slides, and I would love to answer them. Oh? Yeah. Yeah, you can also get away with just doing while loops. They're the same, technically. It's just sometimes things are better reasoned. Like usually when you're iterating through strings or arrays, for loops are better. For loops look like they're more structured, they're more ordered. It's like 0 to this, 0 to the end of the length, whatever. You can still write that as a while loop, but sometimes while loops make more sense. Because honestly, while loops make more sense when you speak about them in English. While this, do this. And at the end of the code, then you make a little bit of this and that, and then boom, you know? Okay, so in this lecture, we will talk about loops, we'll talk about while, for, and the break and continue keywords. And then I will talk to you about interpreting a stack trace error message, debugging a failing test, and using debugging. We won't really go into this that much, because I think it's a little bit too much for today's lecture. But I will show you, after this, I'm actually going to walk through with you the first problem of the workshop, okay? And I will show it to you in CodePen, okay? I think that's more beneficial than looking at this. And I'll show you how to interpret, like, error messages and stuff. So, the while loop. A while loop requires 3 elements. The while keyword, a conditional expression that evaluates to a Boolean value. Booleans are true and false, never forget it. And a block of code. So while, conditional, block of code. Boom, that's the while loop, okay? Very simple to write, easy to remember. Speaks to you in English. While this is true, do this stuff, okay? The block of code will run over and over as long as the conditional expression evaluates to true. So if I say let count equal to 3, while count is greater or equal to 1, console.log count is, and then the count. Count minus minus, we get count is 3, count is 2, count is 1, and then nothing. Because we subtracted 1 from count, and then count happened to be 0, and then count is no longer greater or equal to 1 because 0 is not greater than 1, and it is not 1. Everybody understands this, right? This isn't too confusing. Is everybody okay with the minus minus syntax? It literally just means count is now going to be equal to itself minus 1. Plus plus is the opposite. Plus 1. Okay? Any questions? Okay. While false, console log this line of code will never run. It doesn't run. Okay? If this is false, the thing inside doesn't run, obviously. If you are writing your code and you're like, wait a second, this isn't looping at all. Why is that? It's probably because you messed up the definition of when the for loop should run or the while loops. Whatever, okay? Usually. And how to debug that is to put console logs inside the loops. Console logging is amazing for debugging, okay? It's amazing, that's how you debug. To put console logs everywhere, console log what the iterator is at what point in time, what variables are at what point in time, and you will see like how your code is running. Okay, now it's running this way, this way. Oh, there's the bug. This if statement is wrong, and then you fix it. Console log is your friend. So, while true, console log, this line will run forever, or until the machine running the code runs out of memory. And that is exactly what happens. If we don't tell the while loop to stop, it will never, ever stop. These are called infinite loops. So you have to make sure that the conditional is eventually false, because you will get an infinite loop. We are not decrementing counts ever. So you can see that it runs forever. Any questions on while loops before I continue the slides to for loops? It's pretty straightforward, right? 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 All right. So for loops, you have 3 things as well. The for keyword, 3 optional expressions, and a block of code. Those 3 optional expressions can be thought of the initialization, the condition, and the final expression, okay? And then your block of code. The block of code will run over and over until the condition evaluates to false. Exactly the same as a while loop. These things are interchangeable, okay? So the initialization is run first and only once, okay? It's often used to define a counter variable. Then, before every iteration, the condition is checked to see if it's true. If it is, the for loop will run another iteration. Then, after each iteration, the final expression is run. So, it initializes I, it initializes count, it initializes null, whatever the variable you decided to call. It makes that thing whatever you assign it, and then it checks the statement. It checks to see if that's true. If it is, boom, your code runs, and then when your code finishes, it does that final expression, that I plus plus, that I minus minus, that I plus equals 2, whatever, okay? Yeah. Oh, did it? Yeah, I mean, like, you don't really need, like, you don't need this, right? If I put it down here. Oh. Right? Oh, but if I don't put this break here. like it'll still run. I don't need to put it up here. But if I take this out, like, then it's just gonna run forever. You know? As long as you have the semicolons, you should be fine. Okay? This, I think, this you need to have something. Oh, this just makes it,
Why would we choose to not have three?
because you are a free person and you can do whatever you want. That's why. Honestly, I have no idea. Like, this can just be true, you know, while true, and then it's just going to run forever. But if I had this break, it wouldn't run forever, right? Because once I is 7, break out. There's a lot of, like, weird things you can do with, like, the definitions of for loops, okay? You can literally do whatever you want. I am just telling you what best practice is, okay? And if you tried to put a true in here, and you showed your code to the person interviewing you for a job, they will say, "What is wrong with you? What are you doing? Cannot work here. Please leave." That's what they'll say, okay? Yeah.
Just a quick explanation of continue versus else. Why, if else or when you put continue.
Well, yeah, see, that's the thing. Well, I'll put this back to how it was. So, like, oh my dude. So, like, if I is equal to 7, we continue. And we'll never find nope, right? We'll say found it, and then we'll continue. I'll make it a little smaller. I'll make it 3, and I'll make it if we found 1, okay? So 1, so when I is 0, this doesn't run, but the nope runs, right? Who's with me? Yeah? So then I is incremented by 1, so now I is 1. It is 1, we found it, so we console.log found it. Then we write continue. It skips the rest of the code, and then iterates I one more time. Now you might be saying, why would I do that? And then we say found it, and then it's 2, and then we get the nope because it's not 1, whatever. Why say continue and not an else? Because an if statement and an else statement are combined. It's not like saying, like, if this is true, do this. Continue says if there is 1,000 lines of code underneath that if block, they're not going to run. Continue says skip everything else inside of the loop if you hit it, and just iterate by 1. That's the power of continue. It skips a lot of lines of code. Whereas, if I had an else here, not like that, and I didn't have this, then we would get the same thing, right? If this is true, oh, it's not, else, run this code. However, if there was 1,000 other lines inside of this loop, those lines would still be running. Because the else statement doesn't affect other lines of code that aren't in the if or else ifs, but continue does. Continue just says skip everything, iterate, and start over. That is the difference, okay? Does that make sense? Yes? Okay. So, back to the for loop. As soon as the slides start up. So, back to the for loop. It requires 3 elements, optional expressions. That was a good catch. I didn't even realize it said optional. It's crazy. All right. So, right. You see we have let I equal 1, loop until I is less than or equal to 3, and then I++ at the end of each iteration. So we get console log I is this. I is 1, I is 2, I is 3. Is everyone okay with this? It's okay if you can't remember it as soon as you try to do it yourself, because this is new, right? It's fine. As long as you understand, like, why this is how it is, you know? I mean, maybe not why, but just understand that this is how it is. This is how it works, okay? But like, when I'm done talking and you guys break up into pairs and do your workshops, if you can't remember how to do it right away, don't worry about it, okay? It's fine. It's not like important that you remember things like that, okay? Stuff comes with practice. It comes with time and experience. So, you can loop in either direction. So you could say let I equal 5, I is greater than or equal to 1, and I minus minus. So we get I is 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Does anyone disagree with this? Does anyone think that this is wrong? It isn't. You can do this, okay? You can, like I said, the I, this variable here, it can be whatever you want it to be. It doesn't matter. You can start wherever you want. You can, this doesn't have to be minus minus. It could be minus equals 2,000. It doesn't matter, okay? The definition is up to you. It is your freedom to loop however you want. So, this way you can solve many, many problems, right? Like I said, you can increment by any number. So like I said, I is now 100. We will do this until I is less than or equal to 300 is not true. And we will say I plus equals 100. 100, 200, 300. That simple. Right? Does anybody want me to go over again how the for loop works, or shall we continue? I will take your silence as continue. So we can use for loops to iterate through a string, like I showed you in that capitalized problem. So here I say letters is equal to A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and I say let I equals 0, and we loop until I is less than letters.length is not true anymore. And then we do I plus plus at the end of every iteration. Here, just to show you more clearly, we took letters of I and put it into something called current letter. Okay? So we say let current letter is now going to be equal to letters at I. Then we console.log current letter. A. I is now going to be 1. So we say, again in the loop, we're going to declare current letter. Let current letter equal letters at 1. Index 1. Index 1 is the letter B, and that's why we get B here. Okay? Indexes of strings start at 0 and go until there's no more characters. Okay? The last index is always the length of the string minus 1. That's why we do less than letters.length. If we wanted less than or equal to, we would say I is less than or equal to letters.length minus 1. I said that too quickly, sorry. We say I is less than letters.length because the length is 1 more than the last index. And we want the last index, but nothing past that. Okay? Otherwise we would get undefined. So we would say less than or equal to letters.length minus 1 if we wanted the less than or equal to. That makes logical sense, right? It's just a little tricky and annoying because you aren't used to starting counts at 0, you're used to starting counts at 1, like normal people, right? JavaScript isn't normal, and it also isn't people, so this is what we got, all right? Yeah. I mean, you could. So the thing is that if this were a function, you could console log inside of it. The function is not going to be affected. Nothing in your code base will be affected. You'll just see things over here. So you could still do that. If you wanted all of these, you can't return multiple variables from one function, right? You have to return one value. And so in this case, if we wanted to reverse the order, we would start I at letters.length minus 1 and loop until I is less than 0. Then we would say let results equal empty string and then put each letter of I into result. Then we would return that so we could use that later on. But don't think about how to use it in a function right this second. Just think about the concept of looping through strings. Okay? But if we did just do this, what would the function return? I just said it. I just said it like 5 minutes ago. Why does nobody remember? Functions implicitly return undefined. This is important to remember, okay? It'll save you a headache later. Trust me. So, the continue keyword. The continue keyword will cause the loop to skip to the next iteration. For let I is equal to 1, we will say I is 1. We will say I is less than or equal to 5 is the conditional we are trying to break. And we will say I plus plus. If I is 3, we'll just continue. And then at the bottom, we're going to console log I. Where's the 3? It's not there. Because when I is 3, we continue. We skip everything else at the bottom of the loop. After, not at the bottom of the loop, after the continue word. We skip it all, okay? Then we just iterate. We just go on to the next iteration. Does that make sense? We continue, yeah. If we have lines of code above the if?
Yeah, under the forward above it would iterate those parts and then then we skip everything after.
Yes. Because JavaScript runs line by line. First line first, second line second, third line third, right? So, once you hit that continue keyword, you skip everything at the bottom. But everything is already finished running on top. Okay? Okay. There's a time and a place for the continue keyword. It also works in while loops, like so. But as you can see, we have to decrement in 2 places. Because if we just didn't decrement here and we continued, once this is true, this is just going to keep going like this over and over again because we don't actually change what count is. Oh, sorry. Right? Does that make sense? Okay. So the break keyword breaks permanently outside of the loop. Let my grade equal the string A. While true, so this is going to run forever, right? But wait, my grade plus equals a plus. If my grade dot length is triple equals to 3, we will break. If this plus goes over here, the length is 2. So this does not run, so we iterate again, because true will always be true. Then we put in another plus, A plus plus. That is 3. That is a length of 3. So this runs, break, that's what we get, no infinite loop. Does that make sense? Any questions? The break word also works in for loops. Oh, I did this. I is 10, I is 9, I is 8, I is 7. Up. We finally hit 7, so we break. Loop is done. Breaks out for good, does not continue on to the next iteration. You're just done. Any questions? So, this is true. Developers spend way more time debugging code than writing it, okay? Because usually when you're writing code that is for applications, you're making your own applications, you will be writing thousands and thousands and thousands of lines, okay? The more complex your application is. So when that's done, and you want to, let's say, add a new feature, that new feature could be breaking some lines of code you wrote like a year ago, and you can't remember how they work. So you're going to spend like a week debugging, and it kind of sucks. But that's how life is, you know? If you want to add more things to an old thing, like some things break and you have to remember how to fix them. So a lot of the time you're debugging when you're coding, because it is very easy for typos to slip past your eyes, okay? But enough about this. I will show you. I will show you in here I'll do like half of this. And I'll do like all of this. So always read the README first, okay? I think that's important. Can everybody see? I mean, it's okay if you don't see the README. I'll just tell you what it wants you to do. But always read the README, because they always have examples of what they want you to do here, okay? So the README basically says only odds, define a function only odds that accepts a number as an argument. I'm going to stop right there, and I'm going to go over here. I'm going to comment all this out. I'm going to do it over here, okay? It says, literally it says right in front of me, define a function only odds. So I say function only odds. So if I copy and paste this into here, and I run this, I press the run button up here, I see one green dot, okay? So I'm already on track. So define a function only odds that accepts a number as an argument. So I can say, like, water bottle, and that will be referenced as the number. But why would I do that? Why would I ever do that, you know? So I'm going to call it something that I know what it will be later on. I'll call it num. Okay? It's a random number that anybody can put into my function. And it says, what does it say? It says, accepts a number as an argument. Only odds should return the sum of all odd numbers between the given number and 1. That is what it says. So I will say, let sum equal 0. Then I will say, for let I equal 1, I is less than num, I plus plus. There's my for loop right there. Can everybody see that? Okay. There's my for loop right there. So if I mod 2 is not equal to 0, I will say sum plus equals I. Okay? If the number I is not equal to 0, I mod 2 is equal to 0 would be even. So I mod 2 not equal to 0 would mean it's odd. Then I will say sum is not going to be equal to sum plus that number, I. Then, at the end, well, actually, I will copy this, and I'll put it here. And I will run it. Oh, did I mess? Oh, yeah, you're right. Damn, that's crazy. It's crazy good eyes. Oh, I'm doing this. Run. Wait a second, I did all of that stuff and everything is failing. So let's debug, okay? I think I can make this a little bigger. Oh shit. So, if you're failing, look here and read these, okay? This says only odds returns a number. Expected undefined to equal number. Does anybody know what is wrong with my function? Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So if I did return sum over here, and I ran that, I would get everything passing. What if I did is equal to 2? And then I hit run here. I'm failing one spec. Expected 20 to equal 5. But I'm not looking at the red line anymore, I'm looking down here. So this red line will read what the test spec is expecting to happen from running your function with certain arguments, okay? So it's saying it returns the sum of all odd nums between the provided argument and 0. So that means my function is not doing that. I did something where it's not doing that. But then it says, something down here. It says expected 20 to equal 25. That means that my function is returning 20 when it should be returning 25. So what I recommend you guys doing is doing everything in a REPL over here, because REPLs are easier to console log. You have this console here. There's also a console here. If I press the console button down there, it opens it over here. And then if I did like here, if I did like up here, console.log I, and we ran it, we get a bunch of stuff here. It's over there. It's hard to see. Let me make it. Okay? It's here. And then, when you're done, you clear it, and you close it. And you still have all this stuff here. CodePen is a little annoying to work in. I think maybe you guys think differently. It is all up to you. Do whatever you want. But this is where all the test specs are. When you see describe, don't touch the code, okay? These are the tests. So don't like edit things to make yourself right, okay? But if you don't understand why your tests are failing, read through the tests, okay? Like down here, I was failing this one. Return the sum of all odd nums between the provided argument and 0. That means, and if you look, they say return value, they're calling my function only odds, and they're passing in 10. So they're expecting what that returns to equal 9 plus 7 plus 5 plus 3 plus 1. That's what they're expecting it to equal. So you can get a better sense of what your function needs to be doing if you read through the test specs. Okay? And that is all I got for you. Lecture was kind of long tonight. I apologize. But any lasting questions before you all take a 5-minute break? And then I will divide all of you into pairs, and then you will work together to solve problems using loops. The last question is really hard. Don't be discouraged if you can't get it. I think it's I can't really remember.
Yeah, for this function, for the let sum be set to 0, you do that so it just like starts at 0.
Oh yeah, so
Point needs to be
you see how sum is 0? This is a very common thing. This is like, I don't have to call it sum. I can call it counter. I can call it total. I can call it answer. I can call it result. But basically, if I'm saying I want to add together a certain number of things, I'm going to set it equal to 0. Because the first time, anything plus 0 is itself. So you know your answer won't be wrong. Okay? So usually you set something with the let keyword, not the const keyword, the let keyword to be 0, and then you just add things to it as you find those certain things. And then you will get your sum. That is usually how it goes. Same thing with strings, right? If you want to make a string with only certain letters, you're going to start with an empty string. Not like a string of ABC, right? Because the ABC will be at the start. If you start the count at 5, then your answer will be what it was plus 5, right? Okay. Back here at 8:05, and I will slack out pairs to everybody, and then I'll open the workshop. Good job, guys. Thank you for listening to me.